It really is fascinating seeing history kind of unfold and uh, living in events that are no doubt going to be transcribed into the history books that like kids are going to read in like 10, 20 years. Russia has had an incredibly hectic weekend. It was on the brink of a civil war. On Friday, I went out with my buddies, and I was like, "Oh wow, Russia's about to go into a civil war. This is going to be an event for sure." And literally, like the day later, it's like, "Oh, JK, LOL." Russian mercenary group revolts against Moscow fizzles, but exposes vulnerabilities. The greatest challenge to Russian President Vladimir Putin in his more than 2 decades in power has fizzled out after the rebellious mercenary commander who ordered his troop to march on Moscow abruptly reached a deal with the Kremlin to go into exile and sounded the retreat. The brief revolt, though, exposed vulnerabilities among Russian government forces, with Wagner Group soldiers under the command of Yevgeny Prigozhin. I'm sorry, I'm not going to pronounce most of these names right. Able to move unimpeded into the Russian city of Rostov on Don and advance hundreds of kilometers. Thank you. I know that miles are the American kilometers. Thank you, AP. Towards Moscow. The Russian military scrambled to defend Russia's capital. Under the deal announced Saturday by Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, Prigozhin will go to neighboring Belarus, which has supported Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Charges against him of mounting an armed rebellion will be dropped. This is one of the like craziest things too. It's like they are like gonna be like, you know what? You got us. You can go home. You were in a silly goofy mood. We will let you go home. You wanted to overthrow the government, but you know what? Let's water under the bridge now, you know? That's crazy. I mean, something like this happening in America, it's completely like you can't even dream of this. Like if Blackwater just started burning down like Austin, Texas, and then they're like, okay, we're gonna head to like the capital now because we're not being treated fairly. I mean, this is just ridiculous. You would never dream of something like this. The government also said it would not prosecute Wagner fighters who took part, while those who did not join in were to be offered contracts by the defense ministry. Prigozhin ordered his troops back to their field camps in Ukraine, where they have been fighting alongside Russian regular soldiers. Putin had vowed earlier to punish those behind the armed uprising led by his one-time protege. In a televised speech to the nation, he called the rebellion a betrayal and treason. Yeah, he literally called them like backstabbers, and then they're all like, yeah, you guys are just being goofsters. JK. Yeah, it's all water under the bridge now. That's incredible. That is ridiculous. Putin has been in power for as long as I've been alive. I've never seen him like in this sort of like a weak state. This is very interesting. I don't think he's going to last very long as Russia's leader now. From what I understand about Russian geopolitics, I'm not a big expert by like any means. There are a bunch of oligarchs basically that run Russia, not too dissimilar to the US, but you know, we still have democracy, supposedly. But yeah, Putin is basically just he's incredibly rich too. He keeps a lot of his money off the books, so we can't know exactly how much he has, but he is definitely up there. He's one of the heavy hitters. He's not included in any of those lists because again, a lot of his money is off the books. Just one of these oligarchs that has been running Russia for like the last 2 decades, and I do not see him lasting very long after this incident. In allowing Prigozhin and his forces to go free, Peskov said Putin's highest goal was to avoid bloodshed and internal confrontation with unpredictable results. Yeah, they would have lost. I mean, I don't think there's much any doubt that they were not ready for something like this. If Prigozhin kept marching onto Moscow, I think it's a very likely possibility that Russia, Putin would have lost, and Prigozhin, uh, it would have led to an incredibly wild, unpredictable situation. I don't even know. Like, I saw someone saying that it'd be like Russian balkanizing further, probably. Um, Sounds like a possibility that would have happened. So in that sense, I'm glad that this has ended. There was no winning option here, I think, for Putin and Russia. You know, either they fight like the super bloody civil war in the middle of this already war that they're this 3 day, you know, military operation that they were going to do in Ukraine that's been going on for a year and a half now. There's no winning. They would have lost. They're losing now. They look super weak, which is really bad for someone like Putin, who is, you know, supposed to be like the strongman dictator who's like he doesn't take shit from like anyone, you know? Would you look at that? Some observers said Putin's strongman image has taken a hit. Putin has been diminished for all time by this affair, former US ambassador to Ukraine John Herb said on CNN. Moscow had braced for the arrival of the Wagner forces by erecting checkpoints with armored vehicles and troops on the city's southern edge. About 3,000 Chechen soldiers were pulled from fighting in Ukraine and rushed there early Saturday. State television in Chechnya reported Russian troops armed with machine guns put up checkpoints on Moscow's southern outskirts. Chews dug up sections of highways to slow the march. Wagner troops advanced just 200 kilometers, 120 miles from Moscow, according to Prigozhin. But after the deal was struck, Prigozhin announced that he had decided to retreat to avoid shedding Russian blood. Prigozhin had demanded the ouster of Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, who Prigozhin has long criticized in withering terms for his conduct of the 16-month-long war in Ukraine. That was, you know, the 3 day special military operation. We were just going to take Ukraine really quickly. It didn't happen that way. On Friday, he accused forces under Shoigu's command of attacking Wagner camps and killing a huge number of our comrades. If Putin were to agree to Shoigu's ouster, it could be politically damaging for the president after he branded Prigozhin a backstabbing traitor. I mean, this whole ordeal has been incredibly damaging to Putin. He took super long to reply to when there wasn't anything that was coming out on Friday. I found out about this Friday night, and by that point, he still hadn't said anything. There was no winning for Putin. Again, I don't think it's going to last very long. The US had intelligence that Prigozhin had been building up his forces near the border with Russia for some time. This conflicts with Prigozhin's claim that his rebellion was a response to an attack on his camps in Ukraine on Friday by the Russian military. I want to take time to clarify that I'm not defending Prigozhin. I am not a fan of, you know, the Wagner group. They're a far right militia. I'm not a fan of, you know, any sort of like mercenary group, really, if I'm being honest. Bold statement, I'm sure to be said. Yeah, I don't believe Prigozhin anymore, really, that I believe Putin. I think they're both liars who are ideologically driven to get done what they think is best, and their very twisted views. In announcing the rebellion, Prigozhin accused Russian forces of attacking the Wagner camps in Ukraine with rockets, helicopter gunships, and artillery. He alleged that Gen Valery Gerasimov, chief of the general staff, ordered the attacks following a meeting with Shoigu in which they decided to destroy the military contractor. The defense ministry denied attacking the camps. I have heard reports that Russia has, on occasion, accidentally attacked themselves, so I'm sure there's some truth to what Prigozhin is saying. Congressional leaders were briefed on the Wagner buildup earlier last week, a person familiar with the matter said. The person was not authorized to speak publicly and spoke to the Associated Press on the condition of anonymity. The U.S. intelligence briefing was first reported by CNN. Early Saturday, Prigozhin's private army appeared to control the military headquarters in Rostov-on-Don, a city 660 miles south of Moscow, which runs Russian operations in Ukraine, Britain's Ministry of Defense said. The Russian media reported that several helicopters and a military communications plane were downed by Wagner troops. Russia's defense ministry has not commented. Yeah, I think they shot a total of like 7 aircrafts, some planes, some helicopters, while they were marching on to Moscow before they decided to go, JK, LOL, we're going to go back home. After the agreement de-escalated tensions, video from Rostov-on posted on Russian messaging app channels showed people cheering Wagner troops as they departed. Prigozhin was riding in an SUV followed by a large truck, and people greeted him and some ran to shake his hand. The regional governor later said that all of the troops had left the city. Wagner troops and equipment were also in Lipetsk province, about 360 kilometers south of Moscow. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin declared Monday a non-working day for most residents as part of the heightened security, a measure that remained in effect even after the retreat. Ukrainians hoped the Russian infighting would create opportunities for the army to take back the territory seized by Russian forces. I know this ended really quickly, but I have no doubt that the war in Ukraine is going to wrap up very soon at this point. All this infighting, even though it wasn't like all drawn out and arduous and heavy casualties for both the Wagner and the Russian forces, this still, again, galvanizes the Ukrainian people, shows them that they're united. It shows that the poor conditions that the Wagner people are fighting in, it demoralizes, the Russian and the Wagner groups further. I mean, could you imagine being like a Russian soldier and you lost like one of your best mates to the Wagner people, and now your leader is all like, "Oh yeah, the guy that just shot your homie, he's getting away scot free. He has full immunity now. There's nothing you can do about it." I'd quit. I know you can't, but people just defect to Ukraine. There's a lot of Russian soldiers that are just defecting to Ukraine right now. These events will have been of great comfort to the Ukrainian government and the military, said Ben Berry, senior fellow for land warfare at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. He said that even with a deal, Putin's position has probably been weakened. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said late Saturday, shortly before Prigozhin announced his retreat, that the march exposed weakness in the Kremlin and showed all Russian bandits, mercenaries, oligarchs, that it is easy to capture Russian cities and probably arsenals. Wagner troops have played a crucial role in the Ukrainian war, capturing the eastern city of Bakhmut, an area where the bloodiest and longest battles have taken place. But Prigozhin has increasingly criticized the military brass, accusing it of incompetence and of starving its troops of munitions. Yeah, there's a lot of videos going around of just people hauling out like old tanks, Russian soldiers that are completely untrained, willing to trade like the food, fuel, and munitions for food because they don't have any food, or just some warm clothes because their clothes are out of code or just not up to snuff to survive the harsher conditions in Ukraine during the winter. The 62-year-old Prigozhin, a former convict, has long-standing ties to Putin and won the lucrative Kremlin catering contracts that earned him the nickname Putin's chef. That's crazy. That reminds me, there's like this really buff like White House chef. Like it'd just be so funny if like that dude like had his own personal like army, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna burn down like DC if you don't give me like a good contract, or give me more supplies to like fight with. That's so ridiculous. But reality is bizarre, man. He and a dozen other Russian nationals were charged in the United States with operating a covert social media campaign aimed at fomenting discord ahead of Donald Trump's 2016 presidential election victory. Wagner has sent military contractors to Libya, Syria, and several African countries, and eventually Ukraine. So I did some digging on their Wikipedia to kind of see what they were about, and they've mostly done these contracts kind of like in Africa. Africa is incredibly corrupt, unfortunately. A lot of these dictators there just send in these mercenaries to like kill everyone and like be able to take all the resources from like mines or whatever resource dependency that they need. And while I was looking at this, I was reminded of Blackwater, who, for those of you who are unaware, were the military contractor. If I have any gamers, watching me, if you play GTA 5, these guys are the people that are satirized by the Merryweather Group, which are one of the biggest antagonists in the game. They are notorious for the torture and inhumane things they did in Iraq, to the point that they had to rebrand 3 separate times. So after Blackwater, they became XE Services, and then they became Academy, and now they've merged and become Constellus. Just absolutely inhumane things that they did in Iraq. But could you imagine if these people again just started shooting and like burning down because they didn't like how they were being treated by the US government, or they weren't receiving like as much munitions as they wanted to? We wouldn't take that. Like, it's incredible how weak and the poor state that Russia is in right now, where they can just be like, okay, like we know that you took over like a city, please don't shoot anyone else. Like we maybe it's just the jingoist in me, but we absolutely wouldn't take that. We'd the Blackwater wouldn't exist, you know, if they tried to do something like that. But I mean, that just goes to show how thinly spread Russia is right now in this war, and why I genuinely think that like Ukraine is soon to upswing. They've been making progress, but it's been very slow. But I have no doubt that Ukraine, you know, is probably going to pull ahead, and I have also no doubt that Russia is probably in for more unstable times. I'm just keeping out all the Russian citizens because I mean they're the real victims in all this, the ones that have to deal with all this nonsense, the ones that have been dissenting about like the Ukraine war. They're the ones that actually have to suffer. That's all I got. Thank you for watching. I humbly ask that you like and subscribe. I actually got my first hater. Someone like saw my last artificial intelligence video. I guess they didn't like it, and they just like disliked all of my videos. It was really cool. I saw it like in live time. I'm like, oh, I got my first dislike. That's pretty cool. And then like I checked my analytics like I don't know, like an hour later just to see how the video was doing. And like I saw that like a couple of them had dislikes, and then I checked it. I'm like, that's weird. Like, why am I getting dislikes? And then like I had seen by the end of the day that I disliked like all my videos. So if you guys could like the video, I'd really appreciate that. Take care.